Good evening, friends, and I welcome you all here on behalf of Critical Care Foundation. And we are going to discuss with a topic which is quite disturbing, and each one of us are quite concerned about emergence of what is called black fungus in lay press media, and we have been dealing with it for decades as mucormycosis, a rare disease, a rare fungal infection that we had been encountered in our ICU critical care practices. Uh, During last 30 years, I have seen about 4 cases of mucormycosis
वो पंप काम करेगा
in our ICU, and friends here who have a lot of experience, decades or more than 30 years, 40 years, they can share their experience. We had a long spell of second wave of COVID, and it has been a very serious problem with very high incidence and high mortality as well. And we have gone through a lot of problems, need for beds, and everybody was expected to pitch in and give his best. And the time was so short that even the top authorities in the countries, including ICMR and Ministry of Health, did not give us a comprehensive guideline to treat our patients of COVID. And therefore, the patients were treated in variable ways with variable medicines, protocols, and as we were expecting control of COVID, we had a new problem reported in the media, and that was COVID. That was mucormycosis. It's a rare disease associated with very high incidence, very, very difficult to treat, requires surgery and then a prolonged antifungal treatment, and those antifungals are very, very difficult to be afforded by any person in India. I include everyone when I say anyone. So, as my information, official information is, till this afternoon, there were about less than 12,000 cases reported from the whole country. And the most number of cases have been reported from 2 states, Maharashtra and Gujarat, each reporting little less than 3,000 cases. And then we have number of other states, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, reporting almost less than 1,000 number of cases. My own state is believed to have about little less than 700 cases. So without, and that was the problem, and everybody wants to know why it has happened. The neighbor wants to know, the relative wants to know, a friend wants to know, and even I want to know why it has happened. And in fact, each one of us here wants to know why it has happened, and we are still searching, looking for an answer. So we are going to discuss and find an answer to this issue, and each one of you can participate by putting your comments in the chat box, and you can ask your questions also by putting your questions in the chat box. We have a very eminent panel consisting of Dr. Banambar Ray, who is one of the senior most teachers in critical care medicine in this country. He is located currently at Bhubaneswar, has been head of department of anesthesia and critical care at Tata Main Hospital, before his retirement. We have Professor J.V. Divitia, Professor and Head of Anesthesia and Critical Care Medicine at Tata Hospital, Bombay. Chief Editor, former Chief Editor of Indian Journal of Anesthesia, former President of Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine, a very popular teacher and speaker. We have Professor Ashish Bhalla, who is Professor of Internal Medicine at PGI Chandigarh, a very popular teacher, and when he comes to a hall, all the crowd from adjoining halls are drawn to his hall. He has a lot of interest in tropical diseases, and I love listening to him. I can see lots of very senior teachers around. I can see Professor Nirmal Jain, Professor Mridul Daga, Dr. Bande, and there may be many more which whom I cannot see or I have not been able to identify. But I wish that we can take views of everybody, and I will start here. Professor Bhalla. Now, my first question to everyone would be, what is your opinion about what has caused this present deluge of mucormycosis or black fungus?
Sir, I can set the ball rolling. I think Dr. Divitia is there and many more senior persons around. We are not, as you said in your introduction, that you've seen maybe 4 cases. At PGI Chandigarh, we probably pioneered the diagnosis, the management of rhinocerebral mucormycosis. Me and my colleagues from ENT department and also from neurosurgery, they worked a lot on rhinocerebral mucormycosis and probably has one of the largest data published from here. Our colleagues from nephrology have been Professor K.L. Gupta. He was the former head of nephrology before a couple of years ago. And he has pioneered the work on renal mucor. And you'd be surprised that what you are seeing or what you're talking about is rhinocerebral mucormycosis. We're seeing a lot of renal mucor also. A couple of days, yesterday, we lost a patient to renal mucor who was a diabetic and who had come up to us with an acute renal shutdown. So it's nothing new, but yes, why it is happening now? The kind of patients which we used to encounter in our setup, rhinocerebral mucor, were purely uncontrolled diabetics. And there was nothing else. They were uncontrolled diabetics in the community for a longer period of time, and they would come to us, maybe 4 or 5 cases or 6 cases in a month, giving us a total figure of around 50 cases in a year. The renal mucor was again very commonly seen in uncontrolled diabetics, where there was an acute renal shutdown. The patient a month ago had a creatinine level of 1.4, 1.8, and then suddenly comes to you with a creatinine level of 9 or 10. And when you do an ultrasound and Doppler, you find that there is no renal flow, and you do a CT and you find that the whole kidney is infarcted. So, so one thing which is very common, which we can learn from this, is that uncontrolled diabetics are very prone to this disease. The other kind of fungi which we commonly encounter in the lung are allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis and chronic aspergillosis. Our colleagues from pulmonary medicine department have worked a lot on allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis and chronic pulmonary aspergillosis. And the other thing which we find is aspergillus as a fungal ball in pre-existing lung diseases. So this tells us that uncontrolled sugar along with an pre-existing lung lesion can predispose you to pulmonary mucor, whereas you may not have any pre-existing illness which would predispose you to rhinocerebral mucormycosis. Now uh, can I go on? Is it all right?
Yeah, 30.
Yeah. So the India is the diabetic capital of the
You
world.
can take one more minute, Dr. Bhalla. No problem.
Yeah, we have plenty of uncontrolled diabetics. Then why is it happening now? What we've encountered in this epidemic is, or in this pandemic, is that people have been prescribed, those who've been given a single dose of 6 milligram of dexamethasone, their sugars suddenly jump from 126 fasting to 500 to 600. If they are not monitored, then they go into the community, they remain on that high sugar, and the fungal, which is ubiquitous, may be there in your sinuses, get a fertile ground to grow. That's what I think is the major reason. Uncontrolled, unsupervised high dose steroid in a patient who's not diagnosed diabetic, maybe a pre-diabetic, and goes on undetected for a long time with sugars, uncontrolled sugars.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalla. We all know that there is a strong relationship between uncontrolled diabetes, including diabetic ketoacidosis, and incidence of mucormycosis. I'll go on to Dr. Jiggy Devatia. Same question to you, Jiggy. You are muted.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Rungta. I am afraid I must confess I do not have the kind of experience or knowledge that Dr. Bhalla has. So even though we've been working in a cancer setup for so many years, I must have seen a handful of cases of mucor that required surgical intervention and, had to be sort of taken up and came in a critically ill sort of condition. Even in the current COVID pandemic, we've had thousands of admissions in the hospital and hundreds in the ICU. But as of now, touch wood, we've not seen mucor. So the only, whatever I'm telling you is I'm hearing from the lay press and WhatsApp and that sort of thing. Not even seen a good peer-reviewed paper which has sort of done a good analysis of all the factors that have, may have been considered in a good multivariable analysis about what are the factors which may or may not predispose or have caused, may have been.
Can you be closer to the mic, Jiggy? Your
Okay.
voice is not clear.
So so based on whatever I'm hearing and talking to people, I'm sure, like you all mentioned, it is uncontrolled diabetes seems to be a problem that seems to be there. A lot of people at home quarantine are getting mucor. So who are home isolated seem to be getting mucormycosis. So I guess oxygen doesn't seem to be implicated in each and every case, but I have seen prescriptions by the dozen of patients who are being treated at home who've been getting steroids in various shapes and various forms and various sizes. Okay, and so I'm pretty sure, like Dr. Bhalla pointed out, that steroids increasing the blood sugar levels, which are not well monitored and not well treated, even in our jumbo centers, or these nursing homes which are just inundated by patients. I can't imagine people are doing 4-hourly or 6-hourly blood sugars and titrating the blood sugar levels with insulin or whatever. They are just taking either no anti-diabetic medications, or they're taking their usual oral hypoglycemics, which may be absolutely inadequate when you're being pumped with steroids. So I guess poor blood sugar control is going to be an important factor. Having said that, there are going to be exceptions, that some patients were not diabetic, but they had high blood sugars when they got steroids. Some people say that they were not even getting steroids, but I'm not sure, because not everyone is aware that Medrol is a steroid. Not everyone aware is, that so in a home prescription or in a GP prescription, it's hard to know for patients to tell whether they got steroids or not. So I guess I'm not yet aware of a good epidemiological study which has looked at all the factors and tried to come to some conclusion. Whatever we are doing is based on what we are talking to each other, of course. But I guess immunosuppressed state, lymphopenia is well known in COVID, so maybe that has got something to do with it. But I don't know why. I mean, I've seen lots and lots of invasive aspergillosis as opposed to bronchopulmonary aspergillosis or aspergilloma that Dr. Bhalla talked about. Because even in the pre-COVID era, our patients are immunosuppressed, they're neutropenic, they get all this fancy chemotherapy. So they are prone to, we've seen Candida, we've seen aspergillus. I have not seen mucor. And even in the current pandemic, I think we are seeing our usual mix of aspergillus and Candida. We are not seeing an excess fungal infection. We've not yet seen. So I guess it's something to do with sugar control. The COVID itself may be depressing immunity. I'm not sure about any of the other things, but.
Dr. Rungta, can I come in for just 30 seconds?
Yes, Ashish.
Okay. Sir, Dr. Divitya has raised a very valid question. Our colleagues from, oncology, our colleagues from rheumatology have been using steroids for decades. What is it that is different in this pandemic that these steroids have been used? If you use chronic steroids without antibiotics, you are having...
Yes, Ashish, we will definitely come to that question. That question is there with us, and we will definitely take those questions very clearly. And Dr. Ray, I'm coming to you, and with the caveat that there have been number of informations or preliminary surveys by individuals. One report from Indore has come. They have made a quick survey of about 230 patients of mucormycosis in their area, and they have reported that 100% of them received antibiotics, 20% of them did not receive steroids, about 25% were not diabetics, or they were never diabetics, or so and so forth. So I want to take you to probably a newer area other than diabetes mellitus. So what might have caused this? You are muted. Please unmute yourself, sir. Yes.
Yes. You know, to be very frank, I haven't seen a single case until now of mucormycosis in the intensive care in the last so many years, must be 45 years or so I have been in the intensive care, right? But as an administrator in my previous hospital at Jamshedpur, I used to know if the ENT surgeon or the neurosurgeon would come up with any case of mucor, because we used to invariably send them outside for treatment because they would press for it. And it wouldn't be more than 1 or 2 cases in a year in the eastern part of the country, right? Dr. Bhalla's incidence, in fact, is far ahead of ours, and we never used to get it. And we used to know that it is a case of mucor, and we used to properly warn our people that it will be a long-term treatment and be prepared for it, and we will be paying for it, of course. And it was a very well preserved kind of a society there, and therefore people were all looked after. But after this pandemic here, for the first time in the last 1 month, I have seen 5, out of whom 2 were in the ICU, right? Of both the cases, in fact, one case came and died after 5 days, right? 71-year-old man, and died after 5 days, and he had steroids, 500 milligrams of prednisolone, of methylprednisolone, twice a day for 5 days, right? And he in fact got it at home. I don't know who has prescribed that, but he was a diabetic, and he came on the 10th of April and died on the 15th of April. 5 days, and it was a very severe fungal septicemia. We gave amphotericin B, but we could not save him. Then there are other two cases. Another one case who was a 32-year-old man. He came after a face operation surgery, and it was a radical surgery. He is still there in the hospital. Another case did not come to the ICU, but after the surgical procedure, he is still there in the intensive in the hospital as such. I have seen him yesterday, and he is doing well. The other two cases are actually getting treatment as OPD cases. They did not have any septicemia. So all these 5 cases have had steroids. All these 5 cases have had antibiotics, and all of them, in fact, when they come to us, right from day one, people start giving antibiotics, which I think is misplaced, right? In a viral infection, I don't give antibiotics at all. So many cases I have treated now, but I never had a case of mucor in the last 1 year. And we do not actually give so much of steroids. We do not keep them in the hospital for a long time. We give antibiotics at some stage if they have a secondary infection. But I think antibiotics also have to be blamed, higher antibiotics, particularly for getting in the fungal infection, not only mucor, but also aspergillus and even the other candida infections. So therefore, and all resistant candida infection. Candida tropicalis, something we get it quite often. So therefore, antibiotics, I would certainly say that it is one of the predisposing factors in the corona endemic days. And we do prescribe indiscriminately when the patient comes to us. Even at home, we prescribe antibiotics. At home, we prescribe steroids. At home, we prescribe the anticoagulation, even when they have been having a saturation of 98, 99%. They do not have too much except a little fever and cough. So I think that is one point which I feel must be taken into note.
Dr. Mridul Daga was around. Dr. Mridul Daga, are you around? No. Dr. Nirmal Jain? Dr. Nirmal Jain? He's been professor and head of pulmonology department, is my batchmate at Jaipur. Dr. Nirmal Jain, you are around? I saw you. So would you like to make a comment in about a minute?
Actually, the diabetes and steroids are the two common things. But two other things, they were there in the first wave also. But for the first time, the industrial oxygen has been used. Whether it plays a role or whether the humidifier water plays a role, these two things are coming. Thirdly, the patients who have been improved after COVID, if they are working in an environment where there is a fungus or where they are gardening or they are not using gloves and mask, they may caught because the infection is ubiquitous. So these are the other reasons which has been discussed. For the first time, it is industrial oxygen, which may be contaminated with the mucor. Exactly, I would like to have opinion of the PGI, Dr. Badla.
Thank you, Dr. Nirmal Jain. And we had seen Dr. Bande. Dr. Bande, are you there? So now I just want to mention that our house is full. No more participants can be admitted, and so I would request the host to adjust the new visitors to Facebook. Our maximum capacity is 100 here on this Zoom. Rest of them will be taken to Facebook.
Noted, sir.
Right. Thank you. Now I'm trying to summarize the whole thing, and we will come again with the extended discussion, leaving out diabetes mellitus part. Now, the initial quick surveys from around the world says the incidence of mucormycosis in India following this COVID second wave is unprecedented and needs lots of investigation, including a very serious audit of what has happened. And that will immensely help us in reaching probably a conclusion. That's number one. Number two, the Indian data has indicated that lots of, as Dr. Banambar Ray said, that lots of broad spectrum antibiotics, including MRSA coverage was given to these patients prophylactically in large number of patients for a number of days. Was that disturbance of the normal flora of oropharynx leading to some disturbance and preparing a ground for growth of mucous spores that are ubiquitously lying everywhere in our environment normally. That is one point of thought that we need to ponder. Number three, is this population of COVID patients were particularly amenable to mucor or opportunistic infection? But having said that about opportunistic infection, why should we have only high incidence of mucor? Why not other opportunistic infections, including bacterial, which we so commonly see in our ICUs in critically sick patients? That has not been reported. Number three, some people have raised, as Dr. Nirmal Jain have said, use of a dirty mask and hygienic mask, poor infection control protocol practices in hospitals. But at least 40% of these patients have not visited hospitals. And last but not the least, some doubt has been raised by eminent people, eminent doctors of repute, about overuse of zinc, preparing for ground for food provision for growth of spores of mucormycosis. Historically, these cases have been reported other than in diabetics with high use of steroids, in patients suffering from hematological malignancies after transplants. Dr. Divadia is the best person to endorse or reject those considerations, but those have been reported. There has been a meta-analysis which is under peer review, and there has been personal communication from one friend who has said that a cumulative dose of methylprednisolone of more than 2 grams in total probably was the single most important factor in those who suffered from mucormycosis. There was no mucormycosis in Dubai report. There was no mucormycosis or hardly any mucormycosis in second or third wave in United States or Italy. There were few cases reported in United Kingdom. But are we seeing similar cases in our neighborhood, in other SAARC countries? That is a situation to be watched. Those reports are still awaited. So having built up this picture, Dr. Bhalla, hello.
Sir.
So, possibility of zinc, possibility of antibiotics disturbing the normal flora, the unhygienic mask, inability to maintain infection control protocols. What is your view? All these factors contributing.
Sir, a lot has been said about what happened in the first surge and what is happening in the second surge. Let me start from the first surge. First surge in our ICUs, we were not even seeing a secondary bacterial infection. There were a couple of reasons, and the reasons were we were not using steroids up initial couple of months of the first surge, and everyone was wearing mask, everyone was wearing gloves, and everyone was doing a good, hygiene practices, and using sterile things for managing patients. Move to the next stage, the patients started staying in the ICU for a longer time. They were getting some hospital-acquired infection, and we started seeing Acinetobacter. Move over, there was a study which came that steroids are helpful. So everyone jumped on that bandwagon and started using steroids. Some of us used tocilizumab also upfront for some time. Then it fell into disrepute, which was stopped. When we were using steroids, we started seeing uncommon organism, Burkholderia cepacia, causing sepsis in ICU patients. We were not still seeing fungus, right? And then came the second surge when everyone jumped on the bandwagon that tocilizumab should be used upfront. There was a study, so everyone was getting tocilizumab in hospitals. There were lot of talk about giving high dose steroids upfront. In many of the state protocols, high dose steroid upfront was given, and azithromycin 500 milligram BD for 5 to 7 days. That will destroy your microflora. Along with that, doxycycline was given. And here, let me clarify one point. We had a discussion at ICMR. Why did we want to give doxycycline? And people from Mumbai said that in the months of monsoon, we see a lot of leptospira, which will present very similar like ARDS, and that is why we want to give doxycycline upfront in patients, because we don't want to waste that window. Somehow it percolated, and we started using doxycycline right, left, and center. So it's antibiotics overuse with steroids, high dose, upfront, at home, which caused all this. I give a very simple example. Dr. Divitya is there. He would vouch for it. In most of the cancer chemotherapy patients and neutropenic patients, we ask them to use oral rinses of chlorhexidine. And the reason for that oral rinses of chlorhexidine is to kill the microflora in the oral cavity so that they do not get infection when they are brushing their teeth or things like that. And majority of these cases would end up having oral candidiasis. Why? Because you've destroyed the oral microflora. That is a good enough analogy, that you destroy a microflora by giving antibiotics, and you end up with this. I've read the paper you talking about zinc. I don't know how much we can harp on that. I think two most important things are indiscriminate use of antibiotics upfront, even in mildly symptomatic cases, knowing very well that azithromycin and doxycycline have no antiviral efficacy, and indiscriminate use of high dose steroid in the second surge upfront at home, which is responsible for this disease.
Jiggy?
So Dr. Rungta, Dr. Bande just sent me a WhatsApp. He's not able to connect, but there's a survey from Pune, not survey, there's actual district data from Pune about the cases of mucormycosis.
Yeah.
There are 600 odd cases, okay, almost all 620 cases. So except 9, all have had a history of COVID, okay. Now, very interestingly, about half the patients have never had oxygen, okay. So oxygen is probably not and unlike diabetes, patients can easily tell you whether they got oxygen or they didn't get oxygen. So I think that's a very reliable sort of history that you can get from a patient. So almost half have never received oxygen prior to mucormycosis. Okay, now diabetes and immunocompromised state were present in all except 69. So in almost say 500, almost 500 patients, over 530 patients, they had out of 620, they had some diabetes or immunocompromised condition. Okay, steroids were present in about half, a little over half, 350 out of 620. So again, so we are not able to really pinpoint anything. I mean, industrial oxygen hypothesis doesn't stand because half the patients have not got oxygen. Steroids seems to be there in just about 60% of patients. And, the other one of diabetes, is, and immunocompromise seems to be there in a large number of patients. So, yeah, antibiotics was not asked for in this, but yes, I've seen at home doxycycline plus azithromycin. I've seen when patients who go to they're getting 3-4 liters of oxygen in a small nursing home, and they're getting Magnex and Teicoplanin, and they're getting, all those meropenem and Teicoplanin and all. So there is misuse. Now, all these put together with steroids, I mean, we've been through this, isn't we? Before COVID, we used to talk about resistant bacteria coming up. We've talked about Candida coming up. So all these risk factors have been around, but now we are seeing Mucor now, and it's coming. So why it's coming? My honest answer is I don't know. These are all elements which are there. We cannot ignore them, but if you ask, we cannot pinpoint the cause.
My specific question to you, Dr. Devatia, is why don't we see other opportunistic infection?
No, we do.
No, means in this context.
Yeah. So we do see, we do see other bacterial infections, but Mucor has become, it's such a devastating infection, and it's so prominent, and of course the media has been all over it. So I mean, that's why, now just dispassionately, I know it's a tragedy if someone gets mucormycosis, has to have the eyeball excised and they have to have neurosurgery and all. But say today 11,000 or 12,000 cases of mucormycosis out of lakhs crores that have probably got the infection is a small percentage. It is maybe 10 times or 50 times more mucor than you would normally see, but it's still not a large number in relative terms, right? So, but still my question is, maybe there is more aspergillus, but it's not being reported. I don't know. We are seeing our usual share of opportunistic infections in our COVID patients who've been in our ICU. We prescribe, and our patients are neutropenic, they've got lymphomas, they're undergoing chemotherapy, they get antibiotics, they get broad spectrum antibiotics when they're undergoing chemotherapy along with their COVID treatment, okay, or they have received in the past, so they are being covered, they have been neutropenic, but we are not seeing mucor. So again, there is some elements, I mean, we can't really as of now fit all the pieces of the jigsaw in. There is definitely something, maybe there is a nasal route, because that's why you're getting so much rhinocerebral. Now, Dr. Bhalla's put in a new googly of renal mucormycosis. We are seeing pulmonary mucormycosis. So but there is something in this cocktail which is giving rise to mucor, which again, we did not see much in the first phase. Maybe, are we saying that we are more indiscriminate with steroids this time? Probably right. Are we more indiscriminate with antibiotics? Definitely we are more indiscriminate. In fact, we are getting ivermectin, if you want to call it an antibiotic, ivermectin, doxycycline, azithromycin is a standard. Medrol is a standard. This is, I'm talking of patients who are at home and or who go to so there is a lot of misuse or abuse or whatever you want to call it. But whether all this is the responsible for mucor, I mean, I can't put my finger on it. These are all practices we have to avoid for sure. Whether it will bring down the incidence of mucor, I don't know. Sugar, we have to control. Okay, whether the incidence of mucor will come down, I don't know. In our patients, we are giving antibiotics, we are giving steroids, of course, in not the mega doses. We are giving, but we are controlling the sugar well. We are stopping the steroids as fast as possible. We are trying to stop the antibiotic as fast as well. Touch wood, as of now, we haven't had. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know what is the. All our patients are getting oxygen. All our patients are getting, so. But of course, it's natural. It's medical oxygen. It's not industrial oxygen. We don't know whether all the patients who got mucor were getting industrial oxygen or regular oxygen.
Yes.
Medical oxygen. We don't know. I mean, at least I don't know. That's what.
Yes, Jiggy, thank you so much. Dr. Ray, I'll come to you with a very, very specific question to you. One, you have been probably exposed to the rural crowds maximum out of all 3-4 of us. Most of your practice has been in Jamshedpur or Bhubaneswar. So your rural exposure has been probably the maximum. What is your opinion about did we not use industrial oxygen before these times? My personal view is, even when every kind of best oxygen was available, industrial oxygen was used because it is cheap. It was available in rural areas because it was manufactured by small time manufacturers and easily available. One. Two, is this phase of unhygienic mask use or infection control practices being dumped something new we are seeing, or we have been watching this for ages?
I will tell you.
Number three, we have talked about everything. We have not talked about with favipiravir. I think more than any other drug, almost every COVID patients have received favipiravir in addition to ivermectin, doxycycline, steroids, which has not been so rampantly used in the Western world.
Okay.
So,
your
three
question.
things. Use of industrial oxygen.
No, I have never used industrial oxygen.
No, I'm not talking about you.
Even in the rural areas, they never use, I have seen industrial oxygen. Yes, they have used oxygen rampantly through that Wolf's bottle. You know, that oxygen comes bubbling and then know that oxygen is going. That is what we have seen being used. But in the last 35 years, I have not used that. But I have seen that being used. Number of occasions, primary health centers, even in the district headquarters.
You get me right, sir, there. In primary health centers, CSCs, yes. Small time nursing homes.
You know, the Wolf's bottle with water, which has not been changed for months. If one patient gets it today, this particular bottle, the water will not get changed, and the next patient who comes after a month will get oxygen to the same bottle. I have seen that. And I am sure it must be happening in the rural areas quite often, right? And that is what happens. But industrial oxygen, we never see it being used. It is always the cylinders which come from the oxygen plant, 100% pure, 99.9% pure, not 95% pure. So that is something which the delivery process, we have seen it being used quite rampantly, and I'm sure today also it is being used. I have not seen in the last 5 or 6 years, but until then, I have seen that Wolf's bottle being used. It is wrapped up with the cylinder or with the stand with a bandage cloth, and then that will be a constant feature, even in the sub-divisional and government district headquarter hospitals. Second question you asked is what? You said the remdesivir, the favipiravir is the third question. Then second one is what you asked?
Hygienic masks and, dumping
yes.
of the infection control.
I will tell you, masks that are being used in the rural areas, in the government hospitals, also are the same mask being used for many, many patients, right? To be very precise, one patient came, he happened to be the son of a ex-chief minister of Odisha. He came from a tribal area, tribal district. He was getting a mask, BiPAP ventilation for about 2 years with the same mask, not cleaned, right? And he comes with meningitis. We gave, and it was a pyogenic meningitis. We did not initially do the fungal culture. We gave meropenem, teicoplanin, vancomycin also, not teicoplanin, vancomycin and ceftriaxone. His temperature receded, but again the temperature came up. We thought for 1.5 months we continued the antibiotics. Before that, when we did a fungal culture, it was actually Candida. So we found out the history. We took the same mask, he showed it to us. It is all filled with fungus, right? So this is something which I'm sure it is happening with most of these patients.
Why, sir, my immediate question to you, why he got Candida, why not Mucor?
He didn't get mucor. He got candida.
So, you know, we are,
See,
what
he
is
did
so
not get
specific
mucor.
about mucor this time?
No, mucor he did not get.
So
Mucor
that is exactly what I am trying
I see.
to extract from my panelists here, that why we do not have other opportunistic infections explosion.
Yes, but mucor
We
I
will
haven't
see
seen
here and
yet.
there few cases of candida, few cases of Acinetobacter, but nothing like explosion.
No, I am sure this mucor with COVID-19 must be having some compelling reason for developing mucormycosis, which we are unable to find at this point in time. We know that diabetes is one, steroid is one, but why not the other fungal infections, or we get other fungal infections. So in fact, we get it, we almost treat those who get into higher antibiotics on the ventilator. We do add if antifungal, and most often we add posaconazole nowadays, and maybe that we do not get, maybe posaconazole is a treatment for mucor, so we haven't seen mucor as such.
Sir, I must bring to the notice of this panel that about 6 years back, I'm talking about 2015, oxygen supplier in Jaipur city was raided. And when complete auditing was done, it was found that he was supplying for several years only the industrial oxygen to all the hospitals of Jaipur that he was supplying to. And he was one of the largest suppliers of oxygen to Jaipur city and around. That was just to bring to your notice that yes, industrial oxygen has been in use directly or indirectly by some unscrupulous suppliers. We never probably thought about it that we are getting industrial oxygen, and we always thought that yes, and our meter would never show 100% oxygen, despite that we are doing the best. It would always show 92%, 94%, something like that. Anyway.
So Dr. Rungta,
yeah,
someone has put in the chat that, whether it is the mutant strain. Okay. Now, all I want to say is that, there are two in the north, right? In Delhi and Punjab, it is the Kent variant. Okay. And in Maharashtra, it is the so-called Indian variant. One is 6.1.1, 117, and one is 617.
1.6 in short.
Yeah, so there are two different strains.
Yeah.
The UK variant is more dominant in the north, and the Indian variant is more dominant in Maharashtra, at least, whatever limited understanding we have. And we are seeing mucor in both parts of the country. We have not seen mucor in the UK. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether it is only the...
No, they are seeing mucor. No, not that they are not seeing it at all.
Like this. It's not like an explosion of cases.
No, there is no explosion anywhere.
Explosion. There's no explosion of cases. Yeah. So I don't think we should just... so it may be one of the factors, but I don't think we have as yet got enough information to pinpoint the 1, 2, or 3 factors which are responsible for this massive increase in mucor cases.
So my one final question about this etiology, the background of why mucormycosis. What is your opinion about auditing? Auditing all the cases, those have been treated, and wherever we can reach, however we can reach, with a simple objective. It is not blaming anybody, it is not shaming anybody, it is not with a mind of punishment to anyone, but to know the etiopathogenesis, that we move backwards, taking every case of mucormycosis file backwards and down the line for say about last 3 months or even up to 6 months, what has happened. with every single case.
I think Dr. Rungta, you're absolutely right. This is a need of the hour. And maybe Dr. Bhalla's institute is ideally placed to do such a thing. They've got a fantastic mycology department, Dr. Aruna Loki over there. And this is a perfect case for a case control study. You got your mucous, you got your non-mucous, follow them backwards, see all the factors that are there. I don't know whether we have enough time or we'll get enough cases to do a prospective cohort study. That also should be done, but I'm sure we can do a very good case control study with the kind of resources
Dr. Bhalla?
like PGI has.
Yeah, sir, I was listening to the entire thing very carefully. Couple of points. One, we've seen very unusual organisms as secondary bacterial infection. I had never heard of Chrysobacterium coming in. We've seen Chrysobacterium this time, which is seen in only immunosuppressed individuals. Strenotrophomonas, we've seen quite a lot. Acinetobacter, we've been seeing. Burkholderia, we've seen a lot this time. So these are unusual bacterial organisms. We have close to 65 patients of mucormycosis right now at my institute. And I asked my ENT colleagues to go through that. Majority of them are diabetic. Majority of them have received antibiotics at home. Majority of them have received steroids at home. 90% plus are having, diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes. Majority of them have not received oxygen. They were diagnosed COVID, but they were at home. They have not received oxygen. So that's something which is very important and takes away oxygen from the picture completely. So these are the factors which we can come with. Why mucor? Why not any other fungal infection
or any other opportunistic infection?
So as I said, we've seen opportunistic infection, we've seen bacterial, some of them, but fungus, we have seen Aspergillus, as Dr. Divitya said. We are seeing a lot of patients who have structural lung lesions, and we've seen Aspergillus in them. We have 2 cases of pulmonary histoplasmosis who have come to us, which are COVID positive, but they also had structural lung lesion. One very important thing which has been brought up is that most of these fungi come from the construction site activities. Aspergillus, definitely. Mucor, I cannot say. It is hot, humid environment. I was listening to Dr. Arunaloka Chakravarti the other day. He says, I cannot pinpoint how mucor is coming. But if we read our mycology, it tells us dead decaying vegetables, dead decaying matter. It comes, it spreads in the air. And when you give it a hot, humid environment, which is rich with sugar, it will grow. So these spores are everywhere. You inhale them. You have a moistness in your sinuses. You have some humidified air going in. And then you, on top of it, give them high sugar. Take away the bacteria which were supposed to take control of this fungus by giving indiscriminate antibiotics. And that's how it grows in the sinuses. That's what I can think of. I don't know the role of zinc. No, I cannot comment on the role of zinc.
So, one last thing about this, remdesivir has been used in our country like nowhere else. Mucormycosis is being reported in our country like nowhere else. Is there a possible relationship?
Dr. Rungta, honestly, there's no way we can say yes and there's no way we can say no or be sure of our answer. I mean, unless you do a proper epidemiological case control study, we won't, because, like I was going to ask Dr. Bhalla, many of the factors that we are saying are responsible for mucor are existing in thousands of patients who've never got mucormycosis. So what is the difference? Which is the factor which is most common, less common? I mean, we need a proper study to do that. I mean, otherwise, your guess is as good as mine. I have no way to refute your remdesivir hypothesis.
All right.
Neither do you have any way of proving your remdesivir.
Fine, Jiggy. Dr. Bande is there. Dr. Bande, you want to make a comment in a minute? You
I
unmute
think,
yourself.
yeah, I had sent statistics of
Yeah,
Pune.
Dr. Jiggy
Yeah,
read
he
it for you.
looked at that,
Yes.
and it is so surprising that none of the factors which were supposed to be assuming, like steroids, diabetes, showing any statistical difference, though diabetic populations seem to be more prone, and of course male sex more prone in that. And COVID, of course, 9 cases only did not have history, but it is possible that they were subclinical. So COVID and COVID related, one you mentioned is remdesivir or something more common. It's a gross or very precise retrospective analysis. And tomorrow I have a meeting with the clinical analysis group in Pune. So I will put up this point, and maybe the people from Pune statistical the group will help us to do that. So I think it's a need of the time, and we'll find what is wrong with our analysis as to the etiology of this particular problem codes.
So I like to conclude this particular headings discussion. Now, if you all agree, that means we all agree that oxygen theory is almost absolutely irrelevant.
Yes, sir.
Industrial oxygen or any other oxygen or way of delivery of oxygen. Do we all agree?
Yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
it needs
Yes, yes.
it needs analysis, Dr. Ungta.
No, everything
Because-
needs analysis, but by and large, our current discussion indicates that probably oxygen, this or that, qualitative or quantitative, or the mode of delivery should not have any relevance to high incidence of mucor this time. That is one. Number two, we all agree that
I have not felt any time that oxygen is indirectly also contributing to
right.
mucor.
So-
But it still needs to be found
No,
out.
that's-
I think somebody must have thought of this particular predisposition, and it has actually spreaded like wildfire. They say that humidity goes and all that. Tell me how many of us actually have passed the oxygen through this bottle or any such humidifiers. I don't think we have many, but still we get mucor. So I think as of now, we should actually put to rest that oxygen could not be the cause until we get a proper epidemiological study of all these mucormycosis cases and their history.
So mucor likes glucose, mucor likes acidic media. Dr. Shashank Joshi has forwarded the theory of zinc that mucor thrives when you give zinc. Mucor thrives if you disturb the existing flora with broad spectrum antibiotics, wanted or unwanted. And then steroids is a major culprit. These three things we all agree.
Yes,
Not
sir.
very sure whether zinc, actually everybody.
No, means I have particularly mentioned name of a very senior physician, endocrinologist. He has mentioned, I was reading his article and statement also on zinc theory.
Sir,
So it was particularly Dr. Shashank Joshi, and we have a good lot of respect for that person as a physician. So I'm just mentioning. So I will exclude out zinc from here. So
Yes.
glucose, acidic media, broad spectrum antibiotic use, and of course steroids, and singling out large doses of methylprednisolone. Is that
Yes.
fine? Dr. Ray?
Yes, the large doses of methylprednisolone is in any case not advocated at all. So therefore, whether it has a relationship with mucor, we have seen few cases, as I said, that one such case got 5 days of 1 gram each, I think every day. But that may be just one of anecdotal case, but I'm not sure whether it is related to it. But certainly for different reasons, we do not give large dose steroids.
So, Dr. Rungta, if I may,
Yeah.
instead of trying to pinpoint this cause and that cause and this and that, I think what we should say is use steroids only when indicated in the oxygen dependent patients. Use the recommended small to moderate doses for the shortest possible period. Don't give unnecessary antibiotics. Stop them as soon as possible if you don't need. Control your blood sugars well, and half your job will be done. Then if you get mucormycosis,
Yes.
bad luck. But by and large, with good luck and so on, with whatever has been happening, I
What
guess.
I want to tell this eminent panel here that I will prepare a note, circulate it to all of you, and take your suggestions and comments on those notes that I will prepare and circulate, and subsequently we will try to take them forward. Is that okay?
Yeah, fine.
Right. So we go to the second thing, the management part. Whenever there is a lesion, rhinocerebral, rhinoocular, or all the three, then surgery, of course, has to be done. Now, I was going through a review article or a meta-analysis where they said that the prognosis is anywhere from 40 to 80% only if the treatment is started, appropriate treatment is started within 5 days of the diagnosis. Now, when is the diagnosis made? That remains, not clear. But what is clear that after the patient visits hospital and a diagnosis is made, the treatment must be started within a week's time. Otherwise, the mortality rate is nearly 100%. That is one. And number two, we know liposomal amphotericin B is the drug of choice. And it has to be given over a period of several months. Right? Now, given the type of disease, given the type of requirement, cost, a minimum number of 40 vials will be needed by one patient for a period of treatment to be sustained for 8 weeks. Now, how well you are comfortable if a patient takes 7 injections, 8 injections, 10 injections, 10 doses, and then subsequently surrenders to the economic circumstances. How do we manage such situations? Should we start amphotericin B without making sure that this particular patient is going to take whole duration therapy? Or we do not have the right? This is an ethical, practical, on ground discussion that I wanted to do with this eminent panel. I know the answer may not be very, very difficult. Many of us may not be very, very happy to deal with this question, but still, now that government has given 7 injections to one patient. There was a column in one newspaper that one particular charitable trust has donated 10 injections to a particular hospital, and it was with a photograph. Now, how relevant it is that 10 injections are so important, and if a particular patient, are we probably not doing justice even to one patient or few patients and giving incomplete treatment to a number of patients? Ashish, will you take this question first?
Sir, many of you might not be aware that the government is doing or trying to do a job on this. We had a meeting a couple of days back along with our ENT colleagues with the ministry, and they asked us what is our requirement. And they asked us, all the major centers, what is their requirement? All the states, what is the requirement of amphotericin? Now, let me make a couple of things clear. Amphotericin is not only liposomal amphotericin. You can use conventional amphotericin also in case you can monitor the renal function, the electrolytes in a patient well. So all the hospitalized patient and the conventional amphotericin is probably 1/5 the cost of liposomal amphotericin. Works very well. We didn't have liposomal amphotericin. We were always using conventional amphotericin, and we were doing pretty good with that. Next thing which is available is lipid emulsion, which is an Indianized version. That also works to some extent, slightly expensive, but you need to be more careful. So let's take this out, that if liposomal amphotericin is not available, we can't do it. It has to be amphotericin, maybe any kind of amphotericin, provided the patient is in the hospital and you can monitor it. Number one, liposomal amphotericin only because it is less renal toxic. That is number one. Posaconazole is orally available, is very expensive. Not very many people can take it. Isavuconazole and other drugs, again, expensive, very difficult to get hold of. The government is asking all the premier institutes who are looking at the mucormycosis cases. We have a whole team looking after this. We have, as I said, close to 65 patients. AIIMS, Rishikesh has probably close to 100 odd patients. They asked us, what is your daily requirement? Our daily requirement for amphotericin is 300 vials, daily requirement. I'm not talking about every month or every week. This is what we had told them, that our requirement, if the cases keep on increasing like this, will go up to 500 per day for at least 2 to 3 weeks. That is what the government is trying to procure. That is what the government is aiming to procure for each big tertiary care centers. Up to 500 vials of amphotericin per day. That
now,
is
Dr.
all.
Bhalla, please, I am interrupting you. You'll excuse me for that. I have collected all the data before troubling you here. Government of India has organized delivery of about 40,000 vials over last 3 weeks to all the state governments, all the hospitals in the country put together. I inquired in Jaipur city, even one medical shop does not have any amphotericin B. Number 3, the old good plain simple amphotericin deoxycholate, which we used when I was student, a postgraduate student, was dumped as back as 20 years back. And my good friend would tell me, who was the senior professor, that it is better let the patient die than to, let me complete.
Okay.
Because the monitoring of patients on simple amphotericin B, particularly for hypomagnesemia and renal toxicity, is extremely difficult. Magnesium is not available everywhere for monitoring. You have already excluded possibility of posaconazole. So this is a hopelessly very, very small amount that only one company in India, one pharma company only manufactures the API, the basic salt of amphotericin B liposomal. Nobody at present is manufacturing the old good amphotericin deoxycholate at present. Nobody is manufacturing in India. It is not available outside India. So, let us talk about, I just wanted to request you, let us, just 40 to 60,000 vials of amphotericin B liposomal are available around the country. I will take it like that.
Yes, sir.
My state government has about, 2,000 vials at best. Now your requirement per month is 9,000 vials. One hospital.
Yes.
In one state.
Yes.
So that was my moot question.
Sir, the thing is, just like Dr. Divitya said, and just like Dr. Ray said, they haven't seen something like this. So nobody has seen something like this of this magnitude. We can't be prepared, but we're trying to prepare. We didn't, sir, please let me now complete, sir, please.
Yeah.
We didn't see oxygen shortage, but we tried and we met with whatever the possible. Government is trying. That's my point. Government is trying to do something. There are two things which are very important. One is decreasing the fungal load. If you can get the patient under the surgical knife, remove whatever is the fungus, give whatever you have with you. If you have, this is Dr. Arunalok Chakravarti's words. If you have nothing, try itraconazole. It is, you're giving something. You might say it doesn't work, but you are giving itraconazole with whatever minimum effect it has. Right? Take out the burden of the fungus. Try to remove it as much as possible. Try to give whatever we have. Now, the problem which you said is that if I don't have the adequate 3 grams at least liposomal amphotericin for every patient, should I start it or not? I don't know the answer to those questions. If I have 200 vials, we finished 200 vials. We got 200 vials for a week from the government of India. We finished it in 2 days. We didn't have any to give to our patients. We started alternative. We looked for posaconazole. The hospital acquired it and tried to give it. If it is not available, give itraconazole, give something, give a hope. You try to do whatever is possible within your restrained resources. That is what we are trained for. We can't ask for.
Dr. Bhalla, I was posing a professional question to you, and I was not talking about hope or trying to do something. What is the right thing to do? Yeah, Jiggy, you want to say?
So first, Dr. Rungta, I think you raised a very important question as to about the prolonged treatment that is required. And I agree with Dr. Bhalla that no government in any part of the world can prepare for 10 times or 20 times the incidence of either respiratory failure requiring oxygen or mucormycosis requiring treatment. Now, since mucormycosis is not as rampant as, say, COVID-19, as of now, we have, say, 10, 12,000 cases in the country, across the country. Now, this is a disease which, cannot be treated in nursing homes. We cannot have 50 hospitals or 100 hospitals in the city treating mucormycosis. I think they all have to be centralized. Okay, so that you can do the surgery, because even the surgery is not ordinary surgery. It's terrible, mutilating surgery, requires extensive excision, debridement, whatever you want to call it, and a lot of expertise in that sort of thing, right? And also someone who can take decisions like removing the eyeball of a person. So, it requires a lot of expertise, a lot of courage, and technical expertise also. So I think you have to centralize the mucormycosis cases. Those hospitals can then arrange for amphotericin B. Now, let's put it this way. So far, we are caught unawares by the explosion of cases of mucormycosis. We don't have enough. Now, government is procuring amphotericin B, liposomal, or even ordinary. So that will cover your immediate few days of treatment. Now we have time to plan for the long-term treatment for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And in patients who've stabilized, we have oral alternatives. They are not cheap. Posaconazole is not cheap. There are other considerations to be taken in a proper way. It has to be taken on an empty stomach and then there has to be some high fat something and all those sorts of things. So there are other considerations of posaconazole. Ideally, you need drug monitoring, therapeutic drug monitoring for posaconazole. There is isobuconazole. Now that's a Pfizer drug. And we couldn't get the Pfizer vaccine in time, but maybe we can procure the Pfizer tablets, isobuconazole tablets on time. So after say a week or 10 days, and hopefully the patient stabilizes, you can switch to oral therapy. None of this is cheap. All of it is expensive. But if you got, say, 7 to 10 days of amphotericin B with you for intravenous use, you can try and procure or make arrangements for the oral switch. And we can procure tablets. Government has the money to make the money available.
With very heavy heart, I am pointing out to the panel and to the audience that this amphotericin B liposomal has been prescribed, and the way it has to be administered, written on the prescription, OPD prescription, that you procure 14 from a medical college OPD.
You can't treat it in an OPD. You can't treat it in.
You see, that's the kind of, you have you have caught me absolutely right, Dr. Devatia, when you say it has to be centralized. So that is very, very important. So that's exactly what I wanted to come to. The government of India very quickly, the power that we very quickly should issue directions and plan a strategy that all of these patients should be centralized, and around there should be nodal hospitals in one particular area for south, north, west, east, so on and so forth. There may be few in bigger cities, and there only, and the patients cannot be treated everywhere and anywhere. There will be wastage of resources, and there will be a lot of later on, we like this only, we will be talking about something new happening when the patients were not treated. I'll very quickly go on to Dr. Ray with the same question that we had been discussing. What are your take on this subject?
See, I think
Inadequate, incomplete, probable treatment to these patients.
I do not contribute to the idea that, these patients should be left to themselves and they should be allowed to die, first of all. This is a very, very prolonged treatment and very, very expensive treatment. I think the centralization, I agree with Jiggy that we should really have a centralization, not only for convenience of management, but also for avoiding exploitation of these patients, right? In the various nursing homes or hospitals or anywhere else, right? There will be exploitation and patients will be coming to literally begging for the medications, and doctors will be at a loss to actually meet their demands. This is second. Number three, I think these people, we do not know how long they actually need treatment. I know those treatments, 1 or 2 cases that I was talking about, they used to get treatment for 6 months. 6 months, is it humanly possible? Now, post-COVID mucormycosis, how long they need to be treated? I do not know. So there has to be a funding from somewhere, right? Only few people can afford their treatment. So the funding has got to be, government also cannot really contribute everything. We understand that, right? Then who should be actually funding? So that has got to be really worked out. And you said that 40,000 rupees somebody has spent for 10 vials of, it has come down, the cost has come down about a recent B. And then it is only for publicity purposes. That kind of a thing we should not really have. It has got to be a well organized funding, and funding has got to be government sponsored, right? Unless we do that, we will not be able to meet the demand of these patients. And this is going to come more and more. If there are some 4,200 cases already in India, then I'm sure, I think it is going to go up. So how do you do this? This is what I would like to say.
Dr. Bande, you want to make a comment? You are muted.
I partially agree with Dr. Jiggy's view that they should be centralized, but bringing them together at one place or even few places may be difficult. So wherever there is expertise available, they can be going there, and that's what is happening at this point of time. Regarding the expenditure with the very costly kind of a treatment, that too a very prolonged, I think some kind of fundraising has to be done. Government has to declare there is a kind of epidemic or a kind of a disaster, and then start relieving the costs or give some kind of concessions on this cost, because nobody knew that this kind of disaster is going to fall on us. So government has to take little sympathetic view and bring down the cost and ensure that the availability is guaranteed, because there is a lot of black marketing and malicious things are going about this, which government is not able to control. So there has to be prime aim to do this, where there will be availability of drugs which are essential, though costly, should be made available, and that we at a concessional rates by raising a separate fund for this. That's it.
So thank you so much, panelists. I had posed difficult questions and which are disturbing in nature. But nevertheless, unless we find out the problems and discuss them, we will not be able to, resolve them. The last and the most important question which we can practice and which may have some practical application in our routine practice and which may help our participants here. How can we prevent now onwards mucormycosis in our patients suffering from COVID? Dr. Ray?
Well, we have already discussed, I think, in patches, all those things. We still do not know what is the cause of mucormycosis, but we suspect that the practices that we have in India for treating COVID, maybe the answer lies in those practices, maybe. And I think very simple, ICMR has come out with a very, very nice guideline. And 85% of patients do not require any treatment except symptomatic, right? If you could give paracetamol, you could give some decongestants, you could give some cough syrups, and all that is required. You don't have to do anything other than that. 85% of cases. And I do not know remdesivir nowadays. For quite some time, actually, I do not use remdesivir because I knew that remdesivir may not be doing the good thing that we expect it to do. Plasma, of course, is gone. And tocilizumab, I have never used it. And many people use it. Why do they use it? Antibiotics, I don't use it for 80% of patients. They are at home, and unless the saturation comes down. So all that I am trying to say, you could prevent all those too many interventions. And then, as the other day, I think Raj said that less is more. You do much less, and that is much more for the patient. So I think that is the approach that we should actually follow. Higher antibiotics we should not. For almost 10, 12 days, unless you intervene, you do not require any antibiotics, and you do not require any antifungals in the initial stages. So therefore, I think you need to be very circumspect about your prescriptions, and that is what. Oxygen, I do not agree that oxygen would be a predisposing factor for mucormycosis, right? Steroids, of course, you have to restrict it to 8 to 10 days maximum and not very high doses. Diabetes control, there is no question. Once you give steroids, I think they have to be on insulin. They may be taking their oral hypoglycemic agents, but you have to give them insulin. A stricter control is much more important than a no control or bad control. So all these things, I suppose, would perhaps be seeing the prevention of mucormycosis, perhaps, and then we will come to know. We still do not know what is the cause.
Jiggy?
Yeah, so like I said that, we don't know exactly what causes mucormycosis, but I think if we stick to the basics and do the basic stuff well, I think we should be in a good place. So when I say basic stuff well, means in patients who are mild and home isolated, there is no need for steroids. There is no need for doxycycline, azithromycin, ivermectin. There is no need for, so don't give any antibiotic. An antibiotic includes azithromycin and doxycycline. Don't give unnecessary antibiotics. In a hospitalized patient, if you have to give antibiotics, give only for the minimum duration that's required when there is an infection, and no prophylactic antibiotic just because you're giving a bit of steroid. So control the blood sugar and do the basics well. Stop the steroids when they are not indicated. Avoid large doses of steroids, and I think then we should be okay. So I think that would be my approach, and I don't think you should give any prophylactic antifungals, whether it's voriconazole or any other antifungal. That's absolutely not required. So just take in basic infection control precautions, antibiotic stewardship, steroid stewardship. That's what we need. And fingers crossed.
So very soon we will be having some session on steroid stewardship. Ashish Bhalla, your thoughts on how can we
So when we
see
when
a
we were,
better future?
yeah, when I look at my own practices, whatever the number of cases we have seen, we've close to 4,500 cases treated at our institute. We have a clinical pharmacologist sitting with us.
You are muted, Dr. Bhalla.
So whenever I start talking, your guy mutes me. Doesn't like probably my voice. So anyway, what I was trying to say was that we've treated close to 4,500 patients at our center. Touchwood, till date, we haven't seen a single case of mucormycosis coming up. The reason is antimicrobial stewardship, sticking to basic steroids, basic dose of steroid for minimal period, no unnecessary antibiotics. They've received oxygen, they've received everything else. So holding back, something which this pandemic has taught me, holding back is far more difficult. Writing 4 drugs on a piece of paper takes 2 minutes. Talking to someone, telling him that you don't need steroids, you don't need antibiotics, takes 15 minutes. But that 15 minutes is going to save us from these subsequent disasters like mucormycosis.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalla. And for the benefit of all of us and for endorsement of the panelists, I am, summarizing the last question's answer. And I'll seek your note. And I have included everything that all of you have said. I will suggest, the panel suggests that divide your COVID patients into 2, those who require oxygen and those who do not require oxygen. Who does not require oxygen? Anybody who has 92 or more oxygen, he does not require oxygen, therefore does not require hospitalization. Is that, or I need to increase the oxygen saturation to 93 or 94?
So the ministry says 93. Anything below 93, so we stick to 93.
I even practice 92, but I can revise it. Jiggy?
93 in fact is the recommendation by the ICMR also.
Jiggy?
But 92 I practice and 93 I don't.
So we can make it 93. It doesn't matter.
I mean,
and even my target of oxygen therapy is 92 to 94, not beyond 94.
So we have kept a lot of patients with 92 at home, and all of them have come out. We had no casualties. Through a concerted effort, many of us together kept almost 15,000 plus patients at home during last 2 months. So our target, our cutoff line was 92. But I don't want to say that we were absolutely right.
No, sir. What I'm trying to say is that if we are trying to deviate too much from what the ICMR or the standard guidelines say, then it creates more confusion rather than.
So we will say 93.
Yeah.
That's fine. I agree to that. So divide your patients into 2. Those who require oxygen and need to go to the hospital. So as Dr. Ray said, almost 85 to 88% of the patients will be kept at home, and they do not need any therapy whatsoever, including steroids or antibiotics or oxygen. They just need paracetamol for fever or pain, good hydration, good hygiene, isolation, that's it. And out of the rest, 15 or 12 to 15% of the patients who will go to the hospital, almost 95%, 92% of them would remain outside the ICU or in the SDU, requiring dexamethasone 6 milligram plus oxygen to maintain their oxygen level to about 93. We should not be very ambitious to keep their oxygen level even up to 92 plus, if other parameters are maintained. So less is better. And out of these 12 to 15% patients, that means that will take to about 3 per 100, 3% of the total cases to the ICU for further. And there the consultants or the team of doctors will decide on case-to-case basis that what is required for particular patients. This panel probably should not give advice for those 2-3% patients who will have to be treated on individual case basis, and the team of the consultants, every single unit will have to decide on their own. Is that right?
Sir, agree.
Dr. Ray?
Yes.
Jiggy?
Very much.
Yes.
Dr. Bande, I see you in the frame.
Yes.
Yes. So, so here, don't abuse steroids, don't abuse antibiotics, don't give prophylactic antifungals, don't give prophylactic antibiotics, don't unnecessarily hospitalize patients, don't administer oxygen unnecessarily, do least interventions unless you are absolutely pressed into it. Mucor has not come to stay, it will go, because COVID will also have to go, so the Mucor will also have to go. That's absolutely sure. So we are looking forward to say bye-byes and tadas to both COVID and mucormycosis. The audience are free to write to us on our emails. Most of you have emails or our telephone numbers. You can write a WhatsApp message to any one of us to get an answer. And if there is a comment to be made by any one of you, we have split 1 minute left. Anyone wants to make a comment?
So good evening, Dr. Pradyum Sharma this side.
Hello, Dr. Pradyuman, one of the most eminent physicians who have dealt with a lot of COVID patients this season with great outcomes with minimum interventions. And he has been teaching a lot of doctors about COVID and other things. Yes, Dr. Pradyuman?
So wonderful, nice to see you, and what a lovely comments. And really impressed the way you have presented. And besides the use of remdesivir and TOSI anti-IL-6, you have come out with the miraculous results and without not a zero mucormycosis, zero fungal infections, definitely. Heads off to you. The whole country is sick because of this fungal infection. 9,000 cases of state of Rajasthan has almost close to 870 or 890 cases. And the cause is still elusive. While only India is being suffered, not even Pakistan or Bangladesh. Definitely your message is really taken. This time the physicians of 0 day, they are writing steroids and many more things. So multiple therapy, polytherapy has really spoiled our country. And so the mortality and morbidity is very high. Thank you, Dr. Runka, for beautifully organizing, moderating the whole show, and my sincere thanks.
Thank you,
And
Dr.
really, I'm
Pradyuman.
enlightened
Thank
with
you, my all eminent panelists, for
Yes,
being here, spending your valuable time in these demanding times and taking the questions, trying to answer them, deal with them. And because I knew from the very beginning that we do not have answer to any of these questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.